So in this part, we'll set up the login file itself. So I've prepared this file already. I've created the login.php in the login folder. I've added a form, just like before. It's more or less the same form. So the user, the password, and a submit button. We have our 3 required files. We won't need the confirm logged in for this because this is actually the file where we will log in, which means that we will need to check if the user is logged in or not. And if they are logged in, then we want to redirect them. If not, they are allowed to stay on this page. So let's set up the script. First of all, we'll need an if statement up here. So we'll say if, and we want to run the function logged in. So not the confirm logged in. So if logged in, if the user is already logged in, what we want to do is we want to redirect them. So we want to redirect them to our front page. So redirect to, and the location in this case, which is a file that we haven't set up yet, we'll do that in a second. We'll call it front page. So next up, we want to set up an if statement that will look for if the form has been submitted or not. So we will say if is set state of our post submit, once again, just like before. This will now start our form processing. So in here, we will again set up a variable for our username and our password. So just like before, username equals to the trim function with a MySQLi real escape string. And of course, we need a copy of this for the password. So this time we don't have to hash the password. We don't have to set up iterations or anything. We'll get the information from the database itself. So let's set up a query. So we'll set this to be a select statement for the database itself. So select the ID, the user, and the pass from our users table, where the user is equal to our username. So again, inside of single quotes, inside of curly brackets, our username. And just for good measure, we'll say limit to 1 so that we don't risk getting multiple users back. This is of course something that you would check for at a later date if people are actually trying to insert the same username. If the username is already taken, well, they are not allowed to. But again, in this simple script, we won't focus on that. So let's set up the result. And this is of course the MySQLi query. And this needs the connection again, and it needs our query. So what we want to do now is we want to run an if statement if we actually get rows returned from the database. So if the MySQLi underscore number underscore rows, so the amount of returned rows of the result variable, if that is equal to 1, well, then we found a user. So let's set up a variable that's found user, and we'll set this equal to a fetch array of our result. So MySQLi fetch array of the result. Now we'll try to verify the password that we also get back from the database. So what we'll do here is we'll set up another if statement. So a lot of nested if statements here. So if password verify of the inputted password is actually a match to the found user password, which is from the database. If this returns true, well, we found a user. We'll set up our session. So we'll say session variable. In this case, we'll set up the user ID, which we checked for in the session.php file as well. We'll call it user underscore ID, all in lowercase. And we'll set this equal to the found user ID. We'll set up another session variable as well. What we'll call this is we'll call it the user, because then we also have a username that we can actually write or use. Again, equal to the found user, but in this case, it'll be equal to the username itself. And then if all of this is a success, we will redirect to our front page. And if you want, you can of course set some get variables after the front page.php here so that you can write a message like you're now logged in and so on and so forth. So if the password verify fails, we'll say else. And what we will do here is we will just basically set up a message. So just like before, we'll set up a variable that we call message. And we'll just set it equal to a message that basically says user pass combination incorrect. So this is all that we need for logging in. But also, if we want to log out, we want to redirect people back to this page here. So what we will set up here is something that we'll be using at a later date or at a later time. So outside of the if statement post submit, you can see this final bracket here, we'll set up an else for that as well. So else, and inside of this else, we'll look for if is set of a specific get variable. The get variable, we'll call that logout. So if is set get logout, and our get logout is equal to 1, which is something we will define in a second. Then what we want to do is we want to set up a message that basically just says, you're now logged out. So like before, we also want to output these messages in here. So just after the body, before the H2 here, we'll set up an if statement. So we need to set up the PHP first. And we'll say if not empty message, then echo out a paragraph concatenated by the message. and concatenate it by a ending p tag as well. So now let's check if we can actually log in. So here I'll input my username and my password 123456, log in, and it sends me to frontpage.php, which we haven't created yet, but I am now logged in. So in the final part, we'll set up our front page and we'll also set up a logout script. Thank you for watching.